Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Lounge. Today we're going to talk about the first case of the season. We had the first battle of the Road to Las Vegas series yesterday. I think a great start of the season, 300 plus participants, an all-time high, I think, for this kind of battle. But before going into the details, I would like to usually introduce our guests for today. Going in order, we see Erik. Hi, Erik, Excel robot. I think you
Yay!
might recognize him. I'm also putting the here the YouTube links for their channels. Then we have Dim. I don't know if Dim needs any additional presentation, so welcome, Dim. I'm very glad to have you here.
Good to be here.
Harry, here we go.
Hello. I'm the awful case author, so I'm in a bit of trouble today.
Yeah. Then we have Jaq, returning guest. So welcome back, Jaq. Very nice to be.
Thank you. I'm an
have you
Erik
here.
fan.
And then last but not least, we have Grant again. So hi, Grant. Nice to see you again.
Hey
You can see
there.
the channel here. Cool. So as said, we had the first battle yesterday. I enjoyed a lot personally, but who I am to talk about it when we have Harry here. So we'll let Harry to introduce the battle he designed itself.
Right. So this was first case of Road to Las Vegas 2025. I think there are going to be 9 of these cases throughout the year, and they're basically deciding some portion of who qualifies for the Las Vegas finals. I'll probably get the visual of the case up and then kind of talk you through what I was thinking when I made it.
Yeah, should be it.
So I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Yep, that looks good to me. Yeah, so I'm sure most of you are familiar with kind of the case layouts. So you kind of got questions coming down here. You've got 7 levels of difficulty. And in this case, we are kind of basing everything on the books for The Wizard of Oz. So you might recognize kind of a load of yellow bricks like this as the yellow brick road that Dorothy travels on when she's going to see the wizard. We then have a kind of slightly eviler version of the yellow brick road here. I would say that most financial modelers don't like merged cells. Brittany and a few others might disagree with me, but kind of the merged cells here are probably quite intimidating on first open. We've got the Wicked Witch Waterworks. So in the original books, Dorothy throws a bucket of water over the Wicked Witch, and the Wicked Witch kind of melts. But in this case, she has to kind of get her plumbing hat on, and she has to do a kind of a bit more of an analysis in order to get water over the Wicked Witch. And then finally, we've got this pixel art of the Emerald City. And one of the questions on this case is something I always wondered, kind of watching this as a kid, which was, wow, that's a very green bit of the film. Exactly how green is it? And that's what the participants kind of had to answer. So they would kind of progress through these different tabs, and they'd be solving kind of traversal questions on the brick road. They'd be solving a kind of water flow problem here. And then they'd be solving, something about this Emerald City map. And for me, I was very, very proud of this case. There's lots of different elements. It's quite visual. I'd hope it was quite engaging. So yeah, I was very, very proud of this one, and I was really hoping before it went out that people liked it. Would anybody like to either disagree or or agree with
I
what
will
I've
first
done?
go with a question. How the hell did you produce this nice picture in the Emerald City? And also, I mean, I watched the live stream later, and I saw Anders working on this piece of bonus question, and I went like, were we solving the same case? Because I didn't even read bonus 5, I think it was. So I was like, is it the same case or what?
I thought it would be entertaining for people to kind of jump around between different tabs and have like different structures in front of them on the live stream. So I'm pleased to hear that. How I made it was basically with C#. So we can imagine it as like VBA. There's a lot of kind of actions you can do in Excel that are exposed under the hood in some way. So in VBA, you can write some VBA to, for example, tell you the color of a cell or to write a color to a cell. And what my C# program did was it loaded in a kind of compressed picture that looked just like this, went pixel by pixel through it, and kind of worked out what the colors were, and then set the corresponding color value in Excel. So, it was a bit of code. I'm actually, very open to either run this for people or share it with people if they want to use it on cases in the future. But it's a little piece of code I put together. I won't say whether I put it together for this case or another case, but I had it, and
Can
I hear you,
about
Harry.
that?
Prep,
thought
deal
it'd
with
be good to use
pictures
it.
in future. Got it.
Can I ask you a question about that, Harry? Because I've got a video where I've actually set up a photo in Excel, and I used a formula to drive it, and then conditional formatting to actually set up the individual cells and do the photo. One issue I kept having was running out of. I had too many formats, so the workbook crashed. So at some point, if you have too many different color cells in a workbook, it crashes. Did you have an issue with that at all?
I did not have an issue with that. I think when you use conditional formats, it's a lot more complicated an object, and I think it's advised not to use more than 8, if I'm correct. I've worked kind of with software with Excel before, and for quite a while, and so I'm quite familiar with what's well covered and what isn't. And I can tell you that conditional formatting is one of the least well documented pieces to work with. It's absolutely awful, and I always try to avoid it.
Well, Harry, I wore my emerald shirt for you.
Yeah,
today.
is that a good enough summary?
Sure. This was a piece of magic, honestly.
Did you? That's a very lovely shade of green.
And to go back to your first question, I enjoyed the case a lot, actually. So it was, I think, really balanced, and also the scores kind of reflect the level of complexity. So no full scores for this case. Dim getting really close, and also quite with a gap compared to the other players, to be honest. So I think a very, very good level of difficulty. And also the general team, I think it was very, very nice. So this map concept plus some lambda proof, requests in order to kind of break the preparation of the other people, but willing to hear also from the other participants.
I mean, I loved it, but I guess at some level that's not surprising because I did well, so I like cases that I do well. I think the concept of a lambda proof case is maybe a longer discussion that we should maybe get into more like further in, but I didn't find this case particularly resistant to my lambda setup. My stuff for dealing with maps worked fairly nicely on this.
Can we talk a moment about
that
the name of the case? Because when I read it, you're not in Kansas anymore. It was like I got hit in the gut. I'm like, oh shit, we're not in Kansas anymore. This is a Harry case. It affected me when I read that. I'm like, oh man, this is not good. And I think that kind of set the stage for me when I started out and started reading the instructions. And it's about it's like this story. I'm like, just tell me what I need to do.
When I'm writing cases, one thing I try to do is I try to make sure that there's lots of adrenaline running through the veins of the participants.
Thank you.
And It might be quite scary at the time, but I hope that it's something that you look back on fondly, maybe far in the future. But at some
Adrenaline
point.
shortage is never something I have a problem with in these cases.
I will pick also a comment from the chat from Klisman, who is saying that the, let's say, info images linked to the questions are really useful. Of course, totally agree with that. I think we're probably going towards a new standard. This was introduced by Klisman himself, I think, with the isometric chaos. It sets up a very nice standard. I don't know if this is doable for every kind of case, but for sure, then when visual hints are useful, this might become a new standard. So this is an appreciation of the chat from the chat. But Benjamin says probably you could place them in a different place in order to avoid wasting space for the workspace of people not going into a different sheet. For example, I do that.
I will offer a small counterpoint to that, which is when I was solving isometric chaos, I thought the images were great, like a very helpful hint. But on one of the levels, there were like 2 images that showed you 2 different. I think it was on the one of like squares around you or something like that. And I didn't notice that the second one was there until after I had solved the question. I was like, oh, damn, that would have, I mean, it didn't change anything dramatically, but it was like, oh yeah, that would have clarified that it wasn't just always the same size square or something that it clarified. So I'm kind of more on the side of put the pictures right there where you can't miss them. And then if someone wants to move them, that's easy to do.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, while we're on the topic of images, I have a robot command that splits the case up into separate sheets, so I can work without worrying about like things getting in the way below and stuff like that. And those images like all piled up on top of each other. So on every sheet, I had like 6 images like all piled up. I had to like delete them every time. I was like, ah.
I think you need to
Not proof the
stick
case.
to that one, because mine's definitely doing spread those out evenly. But I would actually. I did find they got in the way a bit with the solutions. I've definitely played around with moving them while I've been working on going back over the case, and just kind of like get out of the way, let me do some work. And I loved having that from a neurodivergent perspective, though. Being able to just visually glance at it and comprehend what was being said without having to try and read words. I absolutely loved being able to look at something and know what Harry wanted from us, rather than just kind of sitting there thinking I've kind of got it by just loosely glancing at it and then getting everything wrong. So,
I have a question for Harry, actually. Harry, were you expecting to have people kind of accepting to work with merged cells, or were you expecting people to kind of exit from the framework of merged cells? Because when I saw them, I kind of accepted my destiny and spent the entire prep time building something that worked with merged cells. I feel kind of stupid to have done that, but so I'm curious of how you design that and expect people to behave.
Well, when I design a case, I try to make sure there's I try to make sure that there's multiple ways to go about it, and I kind of wasn't. There's not a kind of standard solution that I had in mind here. So when I solved it, I did work on the merged grid, but to be honest, that was mostly because I had lots of time, and I thought it'd be interesting to see if I could get things working on the merged grid. Whereas obviously the participants are under a lot of time pressure, and I know certainly the instinct of many financial modelers, for example, would be if you see a merged cell, unmerge it immediately and try to work with whatever's left. I think some of the questions are easier with the cells still merged. I know some of the levels were changed since my solve, though, so I'm not 100% sure. And I think that Dim mostly, as the winner of the case, worked on the unmerged grid. Is that right?
I did not
unmerged grid. Is that right?
I didn't. I don't remember thinking particularly about it. Yeah, the merged version worked fine for me.
Can I ask, was the merged cells part of the lambda proofing?
Yes, so I had in mind that this would be a lambda proof case and that the merged cells would kind of intimidate people and they'd be scared to use their lambdas. But it didn't work as well as I'd hoped. Certainly in my original version, there wasn't a yellow cell road before, so it would have been perhaps more of a shock value. But no, I think my lambda proofness has been thoroughly defeated here.
I have a follow-up question then
by several
for one of the audience members, because I've completely just gone to using Liana's grid to column lambda. And in using her grid to column lambda, when I referenced Yellow Brick Road, it auto filters out all the blanks and all the bits and pieces and just gives you the addresses and row column numbers next to each value of what would be the first cell in each merged range. So, Liana, was that intentional, or do you just normally beat Harry's lambda proofing naturally? That I did notice while I've been while we were in training tonight, and I noticed. Hang on a second, I had used it on Yellow Cell Road.
Sorry,
I hadn't used it
right
yet
back.
on Yellow Brick Road. Because I was concerned about that did scare me about the merge cells. But when I just used it without thinking about it, it only showed the top left cell of each merge range, which was quite useful.
So regarding the merge cells, I had a robot command that does unmerge the cells in a really cool way, which I can show off later. But I actually never unmerged them. I just referred to it as one big array, and I worked off of the arrays. And so it never caused me any problems that they were merged. Sorry, Harry. I had plenty of other problems, but the merged cells was not one of them.
I think one interesting aspect with the merged cells where it kind of plays into not necessarily lambda proofing, but you can get some pretty unique sort of questions to ask. Like, for example, in a traditional grid, you have 8 adjacent cells, whereas the merge cell that Harry set up, there's 6 adjacent, and just presenting new problems to solve, not necessarily specifically to go after pre-built lambdas, but also just making people try to approach a traditional question in a different perspective.
Right, I think there is a question for you from the chat.
Yeah, so,
so I skipped level 3. I did not. I think that's what people who scored the same as me probably did. I just saw level 3 and just skipped it and looked at level 4. And one thing I liked about this case was everything was a little bit different. So
I think that was a pretty good strategy, actually. I definitely solved level 3 and was like, ooh, that was pretty tough. And then breezed through level 4.
Yeah.
So a lot of people seem to struggle with level 3, but
original version.
Yeah, please, Eric, go ahead.
In the original version, level 4 was actually level 2, and the third level there. I think they explained this on the live stream. It was a kind of harder version of that level 3. So instead of always going up, you'd kind of swap between going up and going down each time. So what you're doing is you're going to neighboring cells, and in the final version of the case, it was go to the largest cell, largest cell, largest cell. But in the original, it was largest cell, smallest cell, largest cell, smallest cell, until you got stuck. And that's actually quite a hard question. And the reason that was level 3 originally was because I didn't order the questions in order of difficulty originally. It was kind of one level per character, and their difficulties kind of were not necessarily tied to where they were in the levels. And the idea would be that someone would kind of read through all the levels and then decide which ones to do. And so when they were simplifying the case, I guess they simplified the kind of the hard level 3 and kept it as level 3. And that's kind of why the difficulty is out of order there a little bit.
Yeah, level 3 reminded me of the question, probably it was in the qualifier for 2024 of Lana, having to to eat the bananas, I think, or going out the cage. So it's kind of probably a similar pattern where you need to find the closest one and move, and then check again, and then move, and then if you reach a certain condition, you stop. So I kind of felt it was similar, but of course not the same. Didn't have so many issues with level 3, to be honest. Level 4 was the one that took me too long. Even if I already had the lambda for the snake movement, didn't remember to have it. Of course, with merge cell, it was a nightmare. So I ended up modeling the row shift according also to the position of the brick, which might be on one column or the column immediately after or before. It was a nightmare. Ended up matching the example like 10 minutes after the actual model being ready. So come on. When I saw the live stream just merging the cell, compacting everything, I said, no, it was like a 2 minutes thing. And
but so for that, I didn't unmerge. I just used 2-row to skip
and then
out
flipping the array.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's clever. That's very clever. And I think we then have level 5, which I think is different. Sorry, a small break. We had the MECC going on this weekend, so we need to kind of do not spoil too much around some questions. But I think, Erik, correct me if I'm wrong, those kind of questions are quite different compared to the MECC one. So I think we're quite safe.
Yes.
And level 5 has to...
Almost all of the questions.
Yeah, basically. And level 5 has to reach cell 96, starting from a random position. Curious to see your strategy, guys, on this question, because I think I solved it partially with a spot-on solution, like with 10 seconds left on the clock, but not confident at all about the approach I used.
So I'll tell you what I did. So I looked at that. I said, wait, everybody just has to get to 96. Okay, but I'm sure on the next level we'll have to go to like variable endpoints. And then I realized we didn't have to go to variable endpoints. And I was like, okay, well then I basically made a copy of the grid, went to 96, put in 0, then went to the left of it, put in equals that plus 1, and copy that to the left. Went to the right of it, equals that plus 1, copy that to the right. And then for everything above and below, I just said equals min of the 2 it's touching plus 1, and carry that up, and min of the 2 it's touching above plus 1, and carry down. You had to be a little careful around the edges, but other than that, that worked pretty neatly.
So I guess the trick that we sometimes see used for calculating distances on paths or mazes would work here with circular references. If you work on the merged grid, look at the 6 around you, and paste that formula everywhere, that would kind of be pretty much the same as what you did, right, Dim?
Yeah, I mean that would give you. It's a little more complex with the circs, but then that would give you the flexibility to move it. But when I knew I only had to put it in one place, it was just then there's only one direction anything has to look in. So that's definitely easier. There is a way, like mathematically, in the same way that you can, like for Toto just walking along and down, that you can say, okay, well, it's the row difference plus the column difference. There is a way similarly that you can take the row difference and the column difference in a hex grid and work out the number of steps in this kind of metric. But it's a little bit complicated. Like if we were going to have to do, that's why I said, like, as soon as I looked at it, I looked ahead to see how much more if we were gonna have to do a bunch more with it, I would have probably taken a pen and a piece of paper and scribbled out to say, okay, wait, hang on. If I'm this many rows away and this many columns away, how many steps does that mean I have to take? And da, 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 da.
Do you want to elaborate on it being a hex grid a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I guess that's not totally obvious. So
and Lorenzo, can we just get the visual up for this?
Yeah, I think that's the kind of way I went for this question. So trying to model the row difference and column difference, but not sure how successful I was.
Yeah, so the thing I was saying about a hex grid is, I mean, I don't think you need the hex concept particularly because you're not looking for sort of Pythagorean distances or anything, but yeah, like if you sort of overlaid each cell in this grid with a regular hexagon, you'd have to kind of shift the row heights a little bit to make it work. But you basically get a sort of beehive here, with each cell having 6 hexagonal neighbors. So that's just kind of how I thought about this one.
I'm not going to sit here and do this all day, don't worry. There you go. So you see, it's like a hexagon in that there are kind of 6 principal directions that you can go in, right? And I'll bring up while the other competitors talk about how they tackled level 5, I'll just bring up this visual of it as well. Grant, how did you tackle level 5?
Well, I didn't. No, I mean, I saw it and I thought that the best opportunity was level 4 in the bonus problems. So I think I was trying my best to get bonus 4 in the books before time ran out, but I finished level 4 with under a minute left, and I realized that I had to sum the path along the way, not just get whatever the last cell is or something. So I was down to the wire on my timing.
Did anybody else have a go at level 5?
When looking at the example, I tried to desperately compute the, again, row difference and column difference plus the diagonal piece. So looking at this, I kind of imagine the number of steps was, of course, the diagonal bit. And then if you had the, let's say, reminder of the movement left on the columns, so horizontally, I took the distance, but distance divided by 2 because it's double size brick. Otherwise, if it was on the column on the rows, so vertically, just normal distance, and that's it, because those are single dimension bricks on the vertical. Not sure I scored 100%. Probably I did not, but quite sure I scored something because I was matching the example. So probably did the job partially, but it was very short on time. So
I guess it sounds like you might have had something that worked for like even row differences and not for odd row differences, maybe?
Probably, yeah.
Sure.
Probably, yes.
On the live stream, they made the point that kind of if you had steps over on the right, then that's kind of a distance of 2 over this way, whereas it's a difference of kind of 1 going up this way, as in from the kind of equivalent point on the brick. So they said that, I think in their solves, they had everything kind of 1 off if it was on the right-hand side of 96, and not 1 off if it was on the left-hand side.
Oh, interesting. So they were like measuring to the right-hand side of the merged cell in one direction and to the left-hand in the other, or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Hmm.
But you can see here that kind of you've got this kind of diagonal motion and you've got a kind of flat motion, and that's how you would kind of build up the max thing, as in the metric that we discussed earlier. So if you're if your height away from 96 is more than your distance, then the kind of horizontal distance doesn't matter at all, because you'll always be able to kind of get to the right point within your vertical moves.
That's pretty much the solution that I worked out was, if your height exceeds the number of the difference in your vertical, then it's just your height is your distance, because you're going there and then you're going straight down or up or whatever it needs to be. But then if it didn't, then you needed to add, I used an int of half of the difference between the two, added onto the movement in height to get the solution for that one.
Nice.
That did. Don't take any notes, Tim. To be fair, you finished the whole case. This was me after the fact playing around. So.
I definitely feel like this level was more lambda proof than the rest.
Did Dim just say battle?
Oh yeah, am I not supposed to have mentioned that yet?
No. I think that's a nice time to mention this battle. I think we've agreed to do a 4-person speedrun between Erik, way up there, Dim way up there, myself, and Giles, who's not on this call.
Because he's too humble.
Because he's too humble for this call. And the first, we're planning to try this for all the cases, but the first one we're planning to do live together in London in a couple of weeks' time. And we'll all be speed running Harry's case. I'm not quite sure how we're working out the technical aspect, but we'll be speed running Harry's case, and obviously Dim doesn't need to speed run it, given his, he finishes it in record time anyway.
We're gonna hold one arm behind his back.
Dim has to solve everything. The rest of us can just do. Wait.
That sounds very exciting, doesn't it?
Appropriately dressed for the battle.
What sort of limitations are there when it comes to like a speed run itself?
Hang on.
Like, I'd imagine
I've got a corresponding one with your face on it right there. Yeah. So Grant, we've been chatting about it. Dim hasn't said that we can't do any of the things that we want to do to handicap him explicitly. The one thing we wouldn't do is lambdas that are explicitly for this case use. So the limitation I came up with yesterday, I think it was, is if you don't have an explicit case use for it from a historic case, and you can demonstrate that, then it's not a valid lambda to be using in this case. So it's something that you could have created previously for another case being used in the speedrun.
Basically, I think that's basically if there's a dispute, that's what you have to use.
If there's a dispute, you need to
you need to open up an old file and solve it with that lambda right now.
Exactly. What you can't do is go in there and kind of just have equals level 6.
Yeah.
Equals Wicked Witch level 6, equals Wicked Witch level 7, and so on. The other thing we'll be using is OA Robot for, trying to keep the speed levels up. So that's going to be interesting watching the impact that has on our performances.
Did anybody use OA Robot on this case that we know of? And if so, how did they use it?
I used it at least a bit. I definitely used it to import my Lambda collection. I can't remember if I used much other than that.
What about level or bonus 5? Like, I know there's some VBA code there. I guess I can't imagine one other way to do it besides VBA code. So.
I wrote some VBA for that from scratch. Probably wasn't the most efficient decision, but that's what I did.
So I have a generic robot command that'll analyze a range of cells and return back all sorts of information, like everything about those cells. And I am so glad that I didn't see to get to the bonus 5 before I ran out of time, because I did it. I tried my robot command after it was all over, and it took 15 minutes to finish. It hung my machine. I'm like, oh man, that could have been bad. That could have been really bad.
I feel like for the speedrun, we need to impose a non-bonuses clause, except in Dim's case, maybe, where we don't end up crashing the spreadsheet trying to solve Emerald City.
I think we might also need to impose a rule on how many differences in the rules there can be between me and everybody else.
I think it'd be fun if you made it so that You can use ChatGPT. You have to use only what ChatGPT says to solve bonus 5. Whoever can get ChatGPT or something other to spit out a proper solution.
Honestly, my guess, as soon as I looked at that, I thought
I'm totally turning on.
This is going to go to people who use ChatGPT, because like I could remember just enough about the kind of technical details to be able to work that one out, but yeah, like
it took 4 or 5 back and forths after the case was done.
Oh, really?
I was able to get it. Yeah, like 5 back and forth messages.
Yeah, Gabriel confirms it worked for a bonus 5, so was probably a good use case for that.
I did lay a trap for anybody who was unfortunate enough to get the wrong answer from ChatGPT here, which is that if you used indirect or any other volatile functions for any of the levels, and then did bonus 5 afterwards, and it gave you kind of a cell by cell color them approach, then you'll basically end up in the
monster,
boat that Erik was in. And
you're probably going to catch 99.9% of people participating here.
I will say no indirects in my solution.
Yeah, you're part of the 0.1%.
Well, I did update my algorithm, so now it does run fast enough to handle this. So.
Yeah, Erik is a big believer in fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
And I started out in the competitions doing that and writing, because at the time, it's a few years back, we didn't have the lambdas. I was just writing VBA to solve half the things, and I ended up never using any of that VBA. So I'm kind of a bit thankful to Robot, because it reminds me that things are there. I can just, press my button and search for something and it instantly appears if I've created it at any point in the past. Whereas digging through my entire list of VBA functions for kind of like do this thing and do that thing is a lot slower, and I've just never ended up using them because I've just forgotten they existed.
Yeah, that's one of the big reasons that I originally added VBA to Early Robot, was because I had lots and lots of VBA that I never reused because I could never find it when I needed it. And so now I have like literally hundreds of little VBA programs to do different things. And I definitely forget that they exist, but if I do remember that they exist, at least I can find them when I want them. But I do catch myself going through some of these cases, and I'm like, I write it down as I'm going. It's like, oh, I need a VBA command for this, and then I go and write this little macro, and I go to add it to Robot. I'm like, oh shoot, I already had one that did that. So
I can confirm that ChatGPT definitely gets that number wrong.
Really? What's the are we allowed to say the correct answer?
Yep.
What is I got 308 4088.
And you got that from ChatGPT?
Yeah.
Oh, I need to learn your prompts, because I've just prompted into ChatGPT without actually doing much thinking, and I've got nearly double that. Actually, a lot more than double that. I've got 746 million. So I think it's seen the image and taken all the pixels within each cell as separate pixels. Because I've kind of just copied and dumped it in there.
What it ended up doing for my VBA macro it coded was to take the range that it has, output the green RGB value to a different sheet per each cell, and then I just summed it up manually.
So for mine, I just wrote like for each C in selection.cells, C.value equals C.interior.color next C. And then randomly I remembered that the color number that it gives you is like the R, G, and B codes in base 256 or something like that. And then I remembered a random trick to like convert that into hexadecimal so that the first two are the red and the middle two are the green and the last two are the blue. So I did VBA to put in the codes and then converted to hexadecimal, cut out the middle bit, and then converted back to numbers.
Yeah, ChatGPT
It's
did
convoluted, but it worked.
The other thing you mentioned, where it's like 256 squared, or like something times 256 squared plus something else times 256. So it did the mod approach, the int mod approach to that one.
It's an interesting question. When I put it down, I wasn't sure whether it would be accepted or not, because it almost requires VBA. And I know, kind of as a case author, I'm always trying to put in something new for the players. But I wasn't sure whether this was too far or not. How do you guys feel about this kind of thing?
I mean, I don't mind it. Like, cases have often required me to use functions or other things that I've never used before. So in that sense, I don't mind it. I think this might be the first time I've ever used VBA in competition.
I love that there is the opportunity to use it. For me, I never get that far to do bonus 5. So it wasn't going to be a problem. But my limitation, if this was an earlier bonus or something like that, my limitation would be I'm not as good as them at using the immediates window in VBA. I'm used to kind of like writing out some nicely documented code and then, testing it for like 7 days and then.
I have no experience of that process. What is this testing of which you speak?
I think it's an interesting balance of you want a VBA-based question or level to be solvable by someone in the 30 minutes, like in a reasonable amount of time, but also I imagine there's also a balance of not making it like easily solved by ChatGPT by just putting it in, and someone has the opportunity to solve it themselves and also not be diminished by like a fraction of that time by using AI help.
Yeah, I think in some ways the sort of technical knowledge of how to get RG and B from the color code, it feels like more of a barrier to me than needing to write VBA.
I agree.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known that structure. ChatGPT did, but I had no idea that was how it's stored, and I learned an interesting computer science fact through there. So,
what would it take to get a Power Query based question just for us enjoyment?
So there has been at least one that I know of intended to be Power Query based, which was the finals, I think, of the South African Excel Championships in I think the first year, 2023. There was a case. Yep, the Mzansi Hotel Group had like occupancy data for hotels, and there was like I think 17 different hotels in the chain and 2 different tiers of room, and so there were like 34 tabs, each with like weeks of the year listed down the side, and then day 1 to 7 listed across the top. And like Rainier's intention was very much that it would be a Power Query case. It was doable without Power Query, because I remember what I opened it up, and on camera was literally like, oh, this looks like a Power Query. I don't know, maybe I can, and ended up doing a formula solve. But yeah, it was a tricky one.
Yeah, Chrisman is suggesting also Portas. Maybe it was a good candidate for Power Query. I mean, I'm totally the last person to ask for, but yeah, kind of sounds a good.
I think you could, but I think at least for portals, it's probably faster to just do it with VStack. Like with the Mzansi one, you had to kind of stack a bunch of sheets together and extract labels and also unpivot. Yeah. And there was like a lot of manipulation to do. That I think that one's more a kind of naturally Power Query one. Portals, a little bit.
Yeah. We have done level 6 here, which was, I mean, I thought it was easier than it is, because did that after the competition. Took me a few minutes, but realized I didn't have the mixed direction paths, so I was only checking I don't know, 3 steps in one direction, 3 steps in another direction, without mixing up the directions. Apart from that, felt kind of natural using the lambdas we have, but curious to see also your perception and feedback. And then we are level 7, which is a different beast completely. So we'll talk about that.
So this is an interesting one for me, because on distance cases, I think there's sort of two ways that you can think about it, right? Like you can either think, where can I get to in 1 step, in 2 steps, in 3 steps? Or you can think, these are all the places that I could get to. How far away is each of them? And my sort of natural instinct, the first time I remember doing a case like this, which the one I'm thinking of is Harry Watson's census case. He asked something about, the number of cities within 10 units.
Certain radius, yeah.
Within a radius, yeah. And I did that by like building a block that was like whatever 21 by 21 and figuring out the distance and basically forming a mask to say, okay, if I lay this, center this on a cell, then everything that's tagged by this mask is in. And that turned out to be a super inefficient way to do it. And it was much easier to like list all the cities, their locations, and calculate all the distances. And if, like I mentioned earlier, that there is a way to, calculate from row difference and column difference, the sort of hex distance. If you had built that as part of your solution to level 5 or 4 or both, again, I think both, then I think you could do this one that way pretty naturally. But for me, it was easier to do this one as 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps. So in other words, when I say 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps, I mean, like part of my usual map stuff is I have, like I treat everything as whatever, 1,000,000 times the row plus the column is like the code number for that cell. So like A1 is 1,000,001. And then you can think of, any arrow, like an up arrow is going to be minus 1,000,000, a down arrow is going to be plus 1,000,000, left is -1, right is +1. You can do diagonals, you can do whatever. And so I just had to kind of rebase my arrows for this, that like the, up, down, the diagonal up, diagonal down were the same, and then left and right just had to be doubled. And so then I had my kind of 6 offsets of where you could get in 1 step, and then you can just, take that in a column and that in a row and add them together, and that's all the offsets you can get to in 2 steps, and then flatten that out and then add it again, and that's everywhere you can get in 3 steps. And then, so I kind of took, these are all the unique offsets that you can reach in 3 steps, and then add them to my starting point and see what I get to. And on this case, that worked pretty nicely, even though it was kind of much less efficient to do it that way on the census one.
Tim, we had a question from Gabriel, and he was talking about issues running into edge cases, literally, of, when you're working with a radius, but it's on sort of the edge of the map itself. I believe your Lambda for maps that don't use indirect, does that handle that, or?
So yes. So the way I did this was I have a Lambda pretty similar to Liana's one that Jaq was describing earlier. That like, actually, I don't think I even did it with a Lambda. I think I just did it by hand. So I like flatten out the grid with 2col, using like option 3 to skip the blanks. So that just gives me like for here 181, 44, 332, and so on, and then the next row, and then the next row, like just all in 1 column. And then I create the sort of corresponding codes. So you can basically say, like, if map is not blank, then give me the code, which is whatever, 1,000,000 times the row plus the column, otherwise NA, and then flatten that with 2col as well, and it ignores the errors the same way as it ignores the blanks. And so you just get 2 neat blocks, which is here's all the entries and here's all their location codes. So then I say, okay, there's whatever, let's say 30 places you can get to, 30 offsets you can travel from each starting location. So then here's the 30 places you can end up. And then I look that back up into the locations and the values to say, where does that get you to? And then I can just say, if not found X, or like in this case, you're looking for the smallest thing. So like if not found 1,000, and then I can just take the min among those, and it works fine.
Yeah, I always try to leave the errors in if I can, and then if I need to do some kind of aggregation, I'll wrap it in an if error, and as you say, I'd make a kind of big value in this case. But if it was asking for the largest value, I'd make it a small value. So it's basically just excluded from the answer.
I believe your volcano video covers a good portion of the sort of map wrapping with the row codes.
Yeah, so
OA robot was the star there, but the map lambdas were the heavy lifters.
I joked earlier that Erik has a policy of, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I felt a little bit the same way after getting knocked out on a map case. I had, literally since Doggy Daycare was the first case a year ago, I knew that I was a bit behind the curve on map navigation lambdas, but I was like, I'll get around to writing it at some point. And then I got knocked out on a map navigation case. I was like, all right, now I must have the best map lambdas that are possible to have. And I spent probably a full day working on a whole interconnected set of lambdas that can move between addresses and my row column codes and row numbers and column numbers and references in the grid and everything. But I will say since then, Lana Goes Ice Skating was, an allegedly lambda proof case. Isometric Chaos was, somewhat lambda proof. This one was somewhat lambda proof. Mine have worked fine on all of them because I built them in a pretty flexible way.
Can I ask, I know the way you set up your the way you're coding of each cells based off of their reference and then to their code in there, you use I think 1 million for the column and a pretty large digit for the letter or something like that. Is that to work around the edge cases if you need to go beyond the map that's given there, or why 1 million and 1,000?
So the 1,000 is actually, that's not a variable, that's fixed.
Okay.
So it's I started off, I basically stole the idea from Bo, as I did 85% of my most sophisticated Excel ideas, because he's a genius. And if you want to win this thing, then you should probably follow Bo. But yeah, exactly the form. Wait, no, not column times anything, just column, for me at least. So yeah, the formula Harry is typing there, that is the code that I use now. And the reason that there's 1,000 in there is in case in the course of an offset the column goes negative.
Yeah.
So that I can basically take it mod 1,000, mod 1 million, and then subtract off 1,000, rather than if I just took it mod 1,000 and it had gone to -5 is 995, then it's less obvious what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But this way, yeah, exactly. Presumably I'll never have to actually return something that's off the grid or whatever, but I could imagine a case where there are interim steps where you wander off the grid and wander back on and whatever.
So did you figure out, I know that Harry uses some really cool imaginary number techniques in order to keep two numbers bundled in one cell like that. And I thought that was a really cool idea. I was curious if you tried that out and you decided that this way is better performing, or do you just think it's more complicated? Because I think this complex thing is really cool because you can see the numbers individually. There's built-in fast command functions that
readability is probably higher, at least from an outsider.
So I would say readability is good, and the ability to handle one of them being negative or both of them being negative is good. And as Harry is demonstrating right now, rotation is good, including potentially 45-degree rotation when you get to cases where you can do straight and diagonal. Lana Goes Ice Skating. But most of the native complex functions don't want to accept a range. So if I want to say here's 50 starting points, like this Cowardly Lion case, for example, I want to say, okay, there's 30 possible offsets from any starting point, and there are 300 starting points. So what are all the places that you can get to? Well, then I have to do map or some heavy machinery. Whereas in my version, I can just say this column plus this row, done. There's a lot more flexibility with like once everything is converted to numbers, then it's just a plus b to navigate. It's it's just multiply by 3 if you want to take 3 steps. It's that kind of thing.
I did write my own set of im product and im sum and everything to get around that specifically. And I think also sometimes when you use these functions, they don't work unless you put a plus in. This is kind of an issue that happens with some older functions, where it's kind of quite particular about whether it accepts a range or a calculated array or so on. And sometimes it'll just have a value error in when I'm expecting an answer, and this is the way that I fix it.
Mm-hmm.
What about performance? Has anybody dug into the performance?
Bo has tried both approaches on many cases, and I think the complex numbers come out kind of something like 5 to 10% faster on average. But to be honest, most of the overhead will be in the rest of the lambda anyway. So if you're doing any v stacking or any like text to number, number to text, and so on, that also will just completely dominate the difference between these.
Of course, the more important thing is that Harry's approach won't naturally scale to 3 dimensions. Cough, future proofing, cough.
Yeah.
True.
I think it's the mind of a case writer there. Of just how evil could they get, and how can I prepare for this inevitability?
No comment.
In 2 dimensions, there's a nice algebra. In 3 dimensions, there's no algebra. But in 4 dimensions, you get something called the quaternion.
Guys, please. I think we're good.
If you put 3 mathematicians in the panel, Lorenzo.
I will note
at this point I'm leaving.
that there is no native support for quaternions in Excel, and 2, that quaternions have some very unsettling mathematical properties. Don't go there, Harry. Just don't go there.
There's somebody dedicated enough to writing their own functions.
Shall we have a look at question 7, please? So...
Well,
you want to stop them doing this, and you're taking them to question 7 at this point.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
Maybe level 7 is not properly something really digestible.
Let's go to
because
7
this
to
is
get
graph
off the
theory. So.
Okay.
Enough with quaternions. Now to graph and flow theory.
When the case video went here, I said, "No, guys, really." But Harry was kind enough to not give us, simultaneous paths. At least that I need to.
Was he, Lorenzo?
No.
I know. Probably it was it was a double iteration with the FNWC team to cut out some of the complexity, because the original one might have been the.
That's part of it. I was actually just ribbing Harry because it turned out the question I got wrong on level 7. It said that there was only ever 1 available path, but there were in fact 2 available paths. So I was just giving him grief about that.
126.
Yeah. So in this path, you can go 3, 8, 9, 12, but you can also go 2, 3, 8, 9, 12. And whatever solution Dim has come up with clearly wouldn't have solved the full level.
I dispute that.
Because the answer is still correct. It's just that this kind of promise made here isn't correct. I mean, this reminds me of some of the exams that they used to set us at university, where they'd kind of 2.5 hours into the 3-hour exam, they'd go up to the blackboard and they'd write, "By the way, this question is wrong." which was always fun.
Because it had come to their attention during the exam, or just because for lols they didn't mention it until then?
Well, I suppose we don't know, do we? Like, the professors have to get some entertainment somehow.
When I was on the question design team for ModelOff the last couple of years, I always wanted, and nobody else ever ended up agreeing with me, so we never did it, but I always wanted to do a case where, like, you only got half of the cases in advance. So, like, the equivalent of, say, only getting the data for 111 to 120 here, but 121 to 130 was not provided at the time, and then we would, there'd be like a place where all the input data was, and we'd take the models and then drop the second set of input data into it, and you'd be scored half on how well you performed on what was there and half on how well you performed on new data, which I still think would be awesome, but it's only getting harder to implement as the format shifts.
When you're doing competitive programming, they usually give you a few test cases you can run before you submit your answer fully, which I suppose is a bit like the examples here.
Yeah, the examples.
So I know that in
but
some
probably
cases,
they have like 10, 20 test cases to run, so they can be quite sure the solution is robust.
Yeah, I think in some of the Vegas cases, definitely I saw one in 2022. There was a kind of 3 examples per question because there were 3 kind of behaviors that the question could take. I think that's quite good, but obviously
I've been lobbying Andrew to do that, like for cases like whatever, for the volcano case where you either run out of steam or you hit water, or like a Lana case where you either hit an icicle or you hit land, like that there should be an example of each, because otherwise you're only actually giving an example that lets you validate half your logic. I think that would be a good.
I feel like I've seen
it would be relatively easy to do. I mean, in terms of preparing the data, it's just a couple of examples. So it seems like a quick win to be introduced here.
The other advantage is it might break some people's auto set up all of my levels functions that they use.
I'm sorry, did you say advantage or feature, Harry?
I'm all in favor for anything that breaks that sort of thing because I don't have one.
So the problem is if you create all the cases with things that stop that, you're never taking part in the cases that stop that.
This is why I don't mind being a hard case author. Because to balance it out, they use easy cases, and that means I get to do the easy cases more often. This is a joke, by the way.
Sure it is.
Don't hire me as a case author.
So I have a quick question for the people who were getting to level 7 or maybe attempted it after. Were you able to construct like a complete list of all of the proper flows, unique from start to finish, through the data that Excel gave you? Or was it just by looking at the grid and then, I worked my way backwards, end is I just labeled 13, and to get to 13, you go from 10, okay, 10's going from 6 and 7, and just branching out that way. Was there a way to use the data there to create a unique list of all the unique ways to go from start to finish?
So it is doable formula-wise, because I thought this was a very unusual one for the video, because they're normally like very careful about not revealing too much in the video, and then they had like basically exactly what Harry has on screen right now on screen in the video, and so I did a lot of work on level 7 in the time before I started the case. But yes, there is a way. There is a way to build that up, but it's basically, think of it as
it's kind of
like you sort of have a reduce that runs through, like, so you have a starting set of paths, like whatever, from S to 1 and S to 2 and S to 3, and then for each row in that, you take the last element in that, take the list of everything it connects to, repeat that as many times as there is something it connects to, and then stack each of those, and that is like one step, and then you step that until you've got everything to the end.
Got it. I think I probably did the reverse of that manually.
Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely run it from the end back by the same algorithm, but yeah, it's just at each step, just multiply it according to how many ways, either ways into that start or ways out of that end there are, and then add in each of the ones there.
I haven't spent that much time on this level yet. As soon as I see that much directions at the beginning, I just go, okay. But what I was thinking is of taking the table and kind of left joining it against itself to get all of the combinations. Do you think that would work? Because I do actually have a left join array robot command that I might be able to.
I think that would be perfect for this actually. If you like flattened it first.
Yeah.
So that you had like, you know, whatever 3 rows of source with 1, 2, 3, then yeah, I think that would do it.
That is not one of your shared robot commands.
It's true. if I shared all of the robot commands I have, the world would come to a halt because it's just too much to.
What Jaq means by that is, and keep it that way until after February.
No, what Jaq means is share that with myself and Giles until after.
I've actually released more than people know. So.
He does. I don't know if any of you have been seeing my Compbot videos, but there is an Easter egg in Compbot. Has anyone managed to find that yet?
I have not had a chance to explore it yet. I just about had time earlier this weekend. I said, there's no way I'm going to try exploring a whole new robot immediately before a round of competition.
So the Easter egg in Compbot, yes, Kobe has found it, is called Eggy. And if you find Eggy, Eggy will give you a secret setup code. The secret setup code takes you directly to the Excel Robot Master above's personal Compbot collection. At least what is deemed to release to the rest of us.
Dim, Chrisman is asking whether this level 7 is similar to one of your shorts you published.
Yes. So I put out a challenge. It's funny. I put out a challenge like a few weeks ago, and I said, you know, I haven't put out a challenge for almost a year, and then I realized it was 2022 the last time I put out a challenge, so not quite as frequent as I thought. But yes, I put out a challenge inspired by an Advent of Code thing that was similar to this, except it was a graph with edge weights, but not directed like this one. And I think the challenge was to find the pair of nodes that were farthest apart in the graph if you took the most efficient path. But yeah, if you look at, I can post it in a comment later, but if you look at the solutions to that, like Bo has some good like depth first search algorithms, which is basically implementing exactly what I was describing to Grant's question of like building up recursively all the possible paths from one point to another point, or just from one point to everywhere that you can get. Yeah.
I basically wrote this question because I wanted to write a kind of hard graph theory flow case about something called the Ford-Fulkerson algorithm, which is the algorithm that lets you calculate the amount of water coming through. But there's kind of, I couldn't think of a way to write it such that it would be fair to the participants, generally across their backgrounds.
So I will say I Googled, I looked at this in the video, and then I said, okay, this is going to be about max water flow, and Googled network flow algorithms and promptly found Ford-Fulkerson, and spent my 15 minutes before I had to start trying to set up to implement that. And I will say, if I'd had 45 minutes, maybe, I was glad that you didn't ask that, although the kind of first step of setup to that did involve working out the paths and their flows, which served me well for level 7. But I was not ready for the full question.
So the way that you can calculate the flow is basically what's the minimum set of edges that you would delete in order to cut that flow off completely. So I think here, if you cut out this 2, this 5, and this 4, that would kind of disconnect this end from this start. And so the amount of water flowing I'd expect would be 11.
It is. So, here's the envelope that I calculated it on yesterday.
Back of the envelope for the win.
So in order to kind of write a case with that, you'd have to have participants kind of work out how to model connectivity, and then kind of do iteration around all combinations of pipe deletions.
So
which...
the algorithm that I saw seemed simple. Like I said, I wasn't ready, but I thought I was getting there, which was basically just like take any path, flow water along that path, and then reduce everything by that amount, and then take any other. Like it seemed like if you had a way to, you know, recursively pick a path, reduce everything by that much, then it would be like I was probably exaggerate with 45 minutes.
Fulcrum algorithm gives you a like way to find it, but this is kind of what the kind of long form looks like in some sense, right? So yeah, too hard for writing a case. And I thought it'd be fun, and maybe if I wrote this question and put it in a case, somebody else might come up with a better way of. I don't know how the participants here would feel about that, but maybe somebody else would come up with a better way and implement their own water flow case that I couldn't work out how to do.
So I had a moment when I saw this structure, because I did my PhD thesis on like computer science, but specifically structures called labeled partial orders, which are much like this. Like they don't have edge weights, but like this directed graph and kind of things moving around that. So I had a moment where I was like, wait a minute, has Harry inadvertently set a question on my PhD topic? Turned out you hadn't. It was no help at all. But I had a moment where I was like, my time has come.
I wonder if that was it gives you it was a mistake, or whether it gives you an advantage now in saying that, because people are definitely either going to think about making topics on partial orderings now, or definitely never ever writing a case.
I'm not sure anyone whose name isn't Harry was ever going to consider making a case on partial orderings.
Oh, well, that doesn't narrow it down very much, to be honest. There's a lot of Harrys.
Fine.
Harry's battle is coming, I think.
I mean, when we do Harry, like, you know, Goldilocks and the Three Harrys, you're definitely going to be the hard Harry.
I hope that there's some other Harry out there who will challenge me, and have an epic battle over who sets the most reasonable cases, as I describe them when I send them in. Well, when I sent this in, I did say it's a lot easier than the previous cases I wrote, but the previous cases I wrote turned out to be a lot harder than I thought.
Just a bit.
Harry, I actually have a question on the case writing aspect. From the time where you sent in your first draft to Andrew or whoever, how long was like the feedback and revision phase of getting this battle ready from the time when you originally wrote like a first draft of this?
So I sent this in.
I'm going to have to duck out. Sorry.
Thanks.
Bye, Dim.
Thanks for having me, Lorenzo. Good to see you all.
Bye, Dim.
So I wrote this case very shortly after, and this is no coincidence, Klinsmann's Isometric Chaos came out.
Oh.
I thought that was such a kind of creative and good case that I wanted to make a kind of similar, what happens when you're on a different grid version.
I've talked with you about that, yeah. We're on the same.
I think you succeeded because the feeling I had was exactly the same. So,
it jumped. I almost wrote it straight away in a couple of hours, but obviously everybody was in Vegas, and then there's the Christmas holidays and so on. And then almost right after that, we're straight into, okay, we're going to have David Brown write two kind of MECC cases based on the same idea. And so there was immediately, almost kind of after the holidays, a bit of feedback and back and forth there. And then it was the Financial Modeling World Cup round one that was taking up the attention. So kind of there's another big uptick in activity straight after that.
That's really nice. Oh, that's a lot quicker turnaround than I expected. I'm just new to the process myself. I've sent a few things in. So to go from like December to Road to Las Vegas 2025 case 1 is actually like a really quick turnaround.
Well, it's not as quick a turnaround as the 2 cases that were used on game day in Vegas 2024, because
Wow.
I sent those in, and really not very long after, it's, oh my God, they're using it right now. I think the
So
team was kind of very busy there. So they didn't kind of communicate with me as much because they were setting up Vegas and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a big surprise for me when those cases went up, and it wasn't that much, it wasn't very long after I wrote them.
I would say I've had a very different experience in that you guys have never experienced any of my cases.
Not yet. Because
I submitted one 2 years ago. I think, well, it's almost 2 years. 2023 I submitted that one. It's the reason I remember is because it's still in the 5-question format, as far as I remember it. And Dim, who's conveniently dropped off this call at this point in time, apparently tested it and deemed it too hard. So we've never seen it, but I've been told I can't use it for training because it may come out one day. So I think what you'll find is it varies depending on what feels appropriate and right to them at that point in time, because presumably they're processing. I think they've probably got quite a few cases this year, judging from what we've seen coming out of Vegas in the chats. Mm-hmm. And they'll be taking all of these new cases they've got on board, working out like which ones are extremely hard and should be put on kind of, battle day 2 in Vegas. or whether they should be, thanks, Leah. Or whether they're kind of the sorts of things that can be kind of spread out over the year with the Road to Las Vegas, and they'll be managing kind of the different levels of complexity for building up over the year, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, there was a huge kind of surge of excitement at and after Vegas this year. I feel it was very, very successful. And we had people left and right. Oh, I've written a case. It's really encouraging, and I hope that means that the quality of the cases we see in 2025 will be very, very high.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the next cases will look like. In the meantime, I pulled an old question from the chat for Erik about the Masters category.
Yeah, I think it's exciting that there's a Masters category, but now it's like the pressure's on. I have no more excuses. I can't just claim, well, I'm old, I can't keep up with you young people. So yeah, I'm excited about the Masters category, but I definitely have to find time to actually practice because I just never. I never do cases like practicing for these things. So I always find myself a little bit surprised every time I do one of these that I'm not as fast as I'd like to be, or I'm more flustered. And so I just need to practice more. And I think that I at least have a chance at this point. So,
well, as a person who does a lot of practice, I can tell you the surprise effect never ends. So even if you increase your level of training, I think the first time live, it's a one-off. So it's something you can't really replicate during training, at least for me.
Erik, is there an OA robot command to reverse an array?
Yes.
Okay, I could have used that.
Yes.
I just did it on the fly.
Yeah, there's flip horizontal and flip vertical and that sort of thing. But I definitely am going to add a snake version because I saw somebody with that snake lambda and I'm like, oh, that's a really cool lambda. I probably have it on my desk somewhere, some post-it note saying to add a command for that to my library. But I never got around to it. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, could have used the snake command.
I got a very nice zigzag one from Ben DeLeon yesterday. That was great fun.
I've got a
Exactly,
question
that's
for
exactly it.
Lorenzo about your training regime. How do you find it helps you? You know, how do you go about it? Do you try to do lots of cases that are kind of different from each other in a period, or do you try to do a range of similar cases and like train on a specific area? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it's not easy to train yourself without an external person giving directions. So I used to massively solve cases without any particular topic or order, like going in cycles, so avoiding solving too many times the same case in a short time frame. So I was cycling like I don't know, 2023 season, then 2024 and so on. This year, that means last 3 weeks, I started to introduce some themes, some topics. So I don't know, maps or algorithms or whatever. And trying to mix up also completely different questions. So like competitive programming topics or stuff like that. It's still very hard because the amount of questions that you can find is limited. So open to suggestion, of course, from everyone who is going to deep dive into the training topic, which is at least for me very important because I'm not a natural Excel user, so I need to train specifically for this.
Well, the other day I was going through the shop area of MEWC, and there was something like 131 cases there at the moment. And I'm curious, like, how many different cases at this point do you think you've done, if you're still there?
I think I'll speak for Lorenzo since he vanished. I think I understood him saying in a chat once that he's done all of them. Like I think he's one of the few that's like done just about every case. Is that true?
I've lost the connection for probably 20 seconds. So
Harry asked how many of the 135 cases or however many there are out there have you actually been tried out?
I think all of them.
Yeah, that's what I understood. That's amazing.
Of course, I have a tracking spreadsheet for my training, so I can tell you right away. But short answer is every of them. The interesting question is how many times, and I can tell you in a minute. Yeah, I have in my spreadsheet 130. So probably missing a couple of them. And the most solved one is 10 times. And it's what is my flight number from season 2023, I think.
Which is a great beginner's case as well by Patrick Chatan. There's kind of correct. Easy, medium, roughly. Is that about right? Yes,
I would rank like that. Probably the level, it was based on 5 levels, not 7. The level 5 was not so easy. And I think during the live thing, no one even got close to the full score by any mean. But yeah, nowadays it's probably, you can consider it like medium.
Perfect score,
yeah.
Yeah, I think the difficulty of the cases, certainly since 2022, has kind of slowly crept up with the skill level of the participants. Like, you know, when you try the older cases, I'm finding myself getting a lot further with them than I would have at the time. And I'm wondering whether people think that will kind of continue, and cases like Dicey Battle might become easy one day.
What? Backgammon is suddenly like piece of cake.
I think one of my favorite older cases that didn't meet like the structure of like the levels and the bonus ones is the Tetris one, where you're just scoring Tetrises based off of lines.
I think that's one. I think that's one of the free cases, and that's one that I generally tend to kind of give to people, or point them at the site anyway, to try this out. to see how they feel about just solving games in Excel. On the point of the cases getting progressively harder, I think a lot of that, especially in the last 2 years, has to do with all the 365 drops. There's been a constant evolution in the functionality available in 365, and watching things just leap ahead has been really insane, because you've got to keep up by watching Dim. Or fortunately now there's hundreds, there's probably not hundreds of us, but there are quite a few creators in this area that are showing their solutions, and you can learn from a lot more people than just watching Dim's videos, which it was when I started out. And that is like really helping the others to progress, and it's having this snowball impact between us all competing and trying all these things and being on the cutting edge of whatever 365 has released lately. And then the case designers also trying to keep up with trying to outsmart us with, Lambda proof cases and stuff. Excel Athletics Basics.
Yeah, Gabriel says he's not gonna buy Excelopolis and the simple case.
Classic cases, Gabriel.
Excelopolis was probably, I was not into this competition at the time, but I kind of remember the live stream. It was like Dim scoring 18 points, 20 points, which, sounds ridiculous, but they didn't have a dynamic arrays probably, so can imagine the level of difficulty without dynamic arrays. And even today, level 5 of Excelopolis has a crazy hard request to model like land degradation over time, so you cannot plant on the same position, if you remember the topic, which I think is and the simple case, I think it doesn't need any further comment. Still need to kind of understand what tetration is, because I was not familiar with the term. So
there was some discussion on the difficulty of this case, and especially with it being an opener. I always find when I write them, it's very hard for me to judge the difficulty, because usually kind of I have an idea of at least one way to answer it while I'm writing it, and that kind of develops over the course of writing it. How do you guys feel about a case like this?
Honestly, I think it was too hard for the first round, because I feel like there is a certain number of people that this might be their first try at one of these, and I think that if it's your very first try, you want to kind of feel kind of okay with yourself in some way, at least through a certain number of levels. And I think that level 3 was too hard for any anybody who's like getting introduced to this. So that's my feeling. I think it was a great case, but I think it was a little bit too hard for somebody who is new to competition.
I think it also comes down to the preference of each competitor. For example, I kind of feel to perform better in hard cases compared to fast cases, because I'm not so fast, but I probably better at problem solving. And so if I think of a potential new player, if this new player is probably with a higher performance on hard case, it might be better for in that sense. Otherwise, I would have a feeling of being too weak compared to other ones if it was purely a quick thing, a quick competition. I think anyway the case was probably quite too very hard, not on the single request, but having different topics to solve, because you had the patterns on single cells, then you had the patterns on merge cells, then you had the level 7, which was another thing, then you had the VBA for the colors, so lots of topics to be addressed, but I like it a lot. So in terms of putting people under pressure, I think very good job.
Yeah, I think it was a great case.
Thumbs up for me. As an opener, again, mixed feelings, so I don't have a strong argument here.
Yeah, I think if you compare it to what was last year's opener, Doggy Daycare, I think that was a phenomenal case to open up. I think that was back when I still didn't have like any lambdas set up to traverse a grid, but you could still like we're in a position to use the arrows, use the magnitude, and still like get somewhat far into it. But I still think the case in general, you know, it was a good case. It was a really good case. I don't think the opener needs to be as easy as to get someone into it, but I do. I think it for what it is. I like the variety of topics. That might make it more difficult, but I think it might set the tone for what this year is also to come, and we might find that this is one of the easier cases this year. We don't know. So, knock on wood.
And I feel like it might be worth normalizing not getting dim level scores on every case. So like when you have these chats with us, Lorenzo, you could keep like our average scores like above our heads and see that like, you know, I'm not a very good competitor compared to like I don't get close to half of what dim normally gets. But I'm still enjoying taking part every time, and I still have a fair amount to say about it in a lot of ways that I get involved. And I think if you were to know, that is not. So I think knowing that, you know, some of us in here aren't getting close to what Dim does. Some of you do tend to get close to what Dim does, and you know, then you've got kind of Dim and Andrew and Michael and Peter, Jakub, all just kind of like hitting up there fairly consistently. So it's not just, you know, those kind of like top 5, top 10 that are cycling through the same thing over and over. And that's where you need to hit if you're coming in here and trying these cases. If you're hitting half of that, you're doing great, you know.
I can tell you in my experience, my first case was a financial modeling case, and I didn't do very well on it at all. I spent probably about 30 minutes doing formatting, and the other 90 minutes I didn't spend very well either, and I got a very low score. And I did feel quite discouraged.
Part of me that avoids documentation in the middle of a case as well.
Well, you know, I got a little bit discouraged, but what helped was being part of the community, specifically at Pytaris at the time. Pytaris is a company that has a lot of people that compete in these. And I think kind of one good way to kind of help retain people might be to try to make it easier to access the general community. We have a very active kind of WhatsApp group, for example, that we all talk in. That's quite fun. And everybody here is so kind of giving and welcoming in the community. It's really amazing, and I think, you know, if we could get that out there more, that would help retention a lot as well.
Yeah.
One funny story is last year, I don't remember which battle it was, but it was like the first battle that I did, that immediately when I started it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a really good fit for OA Robot. And I got so excited that my hands were shaking so bad that I couldn't type on the keyboard. And I was just like, ah, and I was trying to go fast and I couldn't remember any of my robot keystrokes. And I was just like, ah, and I just totally did horrible. And it was like a complete meltdown. Because I was so excited about it.
If you've never competed, it's really hard to explain like the pressure you feel when that timer starts. You know, you're scrambling to download that file. You're reading like as much as you can. None of it's going in. Do you guys still feel that every single time?
All the time, yeah. And I clearly underestimated that feeling on stage in Vegas. I mean, that really caught me. But yeah, all the time. To add on the difficulty of this case, I think the prep time here made the difference, because this case without prep time would have probably been totally brutal. For example, I had the time with relatively calm setup to test whether I was still going to use my lambdas to move across the grid, to check where the value ends up being in a merge cell, because I was not so sure it was in the left piece of the merge piece. Without this prep time, probably we would have seen 50% lower scores. I don't know. That's also something you need to take into account, because, for example, in Vegas, yes, we had the handouts, but you couldn't really. Probably you could also use the spreadsheet to try things out, but on stage you could not. So would be interesting to see kind of a case like this on stage, like the isometric chaos, which was very similar.
I believe I'm right in saying that the players who were in the finals got a 10-page handout or something like that. Is that right?
I would have died if I got that case.
Yeah. I think it was seven pages in the end, but it was the font size was incredibly small as well. So I think it was Kingsman said this is font size 4. There was an awful lot there, and you could see them. I mean, there's the shots of them all sitting in the green room, kind of they're sitting on the stage, just staring at these sheets and kind of like scrolling through them, trying to process as much as possible in the time that they have. Are those still available? Those?
The sheets? I don't think
handouts?
so. I don't think there's anywhere to get those.
So you can, for the 2 on game day, you can get them from the QR codes in the live streamed video, which is what I did.
That is a funny workaround.
They put the QR codes on the giant screens, and I could screenshot that and then follow that QR code.
I feel like they should have the QR code like in the video itself, or at least, in the notes have a link to that, because that was interesting to read. Especially you could bring that up when you're rewatching the YouTube and see what this is that they're looking at.
Yeah, I will say that it's an interesting topic about prep time, because I think that really is something that is a difference maker from the very top scores. Like, I've just not been a competitor to use the prep time. As soon as I see the email hit my inbox, I watch the video and then immediately jump into the case. One thing, I'm just really excited to get into it. So I think that's something that probably separates, probably the average person to, one of the top competitors.
Yeah, for
Tim's
sure.
Like refresh. It's
a minute late. I'm concerned that I'm missing it.
On the battles where I performed better last year were probably the battles in which I made the best use of the prep time. For example, it was the Ship the War case and also the treasure hunt, where I got like 3rd place in the first one. And on the treasure hunt, I went for the win of the battle. I submitted with 14 minutes, but got wrong a question because I misread. And I felt like there I really used in the right way the prep time. So it's something I try to do every time, but I end up losing a lot of time even there, wandering and going in circles sometimes. So I think Dim, for example, leverages it at its best. So it's really reflected in the score, because he built a full algorithm for the graph on this case, and it made the difference, because I think he and probably Jack Franken were the only ones to tackle level 7, considering the scores. And it meant a full probably 200, 250 points if you got all of them right. So there's a debate on this, if we could shorten the prep time or remove it completely, or just having one look at the case video and then that's it. Mixed feelings also about this.
We could go through the rankings quickly. I know, Lorenzo, you've done this with Elliot before.
I'll be right back.
Yes. Fortunately, I don't have anything ready, but I can share the screen for sure.
I've got it. Don't worry.
Okay.
Let me just hit that button there. And we'll see how many people we recognize and how many people, because I think there are a lot of newcomers this year. So we have the, looks like we have the usual suspects kind of filling up some of these top roles.
Yeah.
And
all the names I can recognize, honestly. So no surprises.
And Colin here, I think he was competing last year and did very well. He's one of the under 25, so he's somebody to watch very closely going forward.
Yeah, I think we have Tim is another young one. I met him in Vegas, 14 plays.
I think Tim's quite active in the WhatsApp group. He's a very funny guy. A very, very nice guy as well. I think a lot of these people have separate YouTube channels as well. I know this person definitely has a YouTube channel.
Go check him out.
Yeah, I think Hayden, Lorenzo, Willem, Andrew, Dim,
I don't
Jeremy.
recognize Nicholas Mycott from France. Do you know him?
He's a regular one.
Yeah, he is. He does rank quite highly in the last few years. He was definitely in last year's analysis that I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also 2023 for sure.
What about Washington? That to me is the only name I'm not recognizing there. So Klingsman,
I think he's the winner of the Brazil local chapter.
Sounds familiar.
Was he? Oh, I met him in Vegas. We didn't actually say exchange names, but I did met them.
We've got Joshua Bruce. We've got Liana, who took out Dim in 2024. Very strong performance. Such an incredible performance that she has her own t-shirt and hat line now.
T-shirt, hat. This is the amended hat with a different face.
Then we have a couple of names I've never seen, like Ryan, Elion, Martin.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with these three names either.
Yes, those are looking like new contestants that I haven't seen. Liana.
Seemingly very, very strong players, though.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I can't remember how many this is out of, but I mean.
So right after them, they're actually ranking above the top ranked Masters person there as well.
So out of 300 to get in the top, in the top sort of 30-ish is very, very strong for a first performance.
So this is actually reflecting the world ranking. I mean, with one battle, it's probably worthless, but the only comment I have is like Dim is getting 1,000 points for sure from this battle. There is quite a gap, for example, with Jaq, 200 points, but Jaq is getting 999 points, so just 1 point less of Dim. So that's quite interesting mechanism for this year. And also, if you rank like 100 plays, 200 plays, you can just ignore that result as long as you post some top 5 scores which are better.
So I think out of the
9,
Jack,
there's still hope for us.
Out of the,
I'm hearing my name is coming in second here, so.
So am I right in saying that out of the 9 battles, your top 5 kind of rankings will go through, and the way they work with the rankings is your score is basically 1001 minus your rank. So Dim would get like 1,000 points, Jaq Franken 999, and
correct.
But how are they doing it for the Masters and the under 25? Is there like
I don't think they have a separate seeding.
Is there a top end of them as well?
From
I thought I saw that Harry Siders got qualified.
Yeah, it just determines whether you are going to qualify for the main draw, but I think it doesn't impact your seeding. The seeding is done regardless of the age group you are in. I think that's my understanding. So you earn a spot into the main draw if you are a top 7 overall or the first among the under 25 or over 50, and that's it. Then the seeding is another story. The seeding is done on total points of your top 5 battles. Sorry, not total points. The mechanism Erik was mentioning. So 1,000 points if you rank first, 999 if you rank second, and so on.
So if a kind of placement around the 100 or 200s does make it into your top 5, that can really push your rank down quite a lot. If you're otherwise scoring in the top 20 or 30 every time. So I'd say it's definitely worth it under this system to compete in all of the battles.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, when is the next battle? What date do we have for that?
Yeah, so that is on the 20th of February.
Very nice.
I've completely messed this table. There we go. This table up.
They need to add an export to Excel.
They do. I think we'd have a lot of fun. Certainly, the people in the community have a lot of fun with kind of these types of rankings. People make predictions and this sort of thing.
Yeah, and I feel like you need to average better than top 23 across your 5 best performances to get a top 32 seed. Okay,
that's a very tall order with over 300 people involved.
Average better than top 23 across your 5 best performances. Okay. Yeah, that's really that's tough. That's tough, but we'll see. Yeah.
So
at least this is going to give you some protection in the main draw.
There are quite a few of contestants that run ranking spreadsheets now. So we had Benny's and Peters from last year that were in the shed. I think Kobe, you've drawn up one this year, or is it someone else that's popped one into the shed folder? I feel like what we need to do is actually just stick all of everyone's kind of like rankings and stuff on a website. Or ideally they'd have it on this website, but with a better, so you could download the data and you could do different analysis on it and that sort of thing.
Well, the kind of websites that do that in like baseball and in football and so on, they're quite big now, aren't they? Definitely some people might be interested in that. Do you have any?
What was the count of people in this session compared
303.
to 303.
I think that's right.
It's all-time high, I think. So it's highest.
305. Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you have any hot take predictions at this stage of the year? Do you want to try to call who the winner of the Microsoft Excel World Championship 2025 will be today?
We did this last time, Harry.
Without the name.
We change it from time to time, and then at some point we will have been right.
So obviously our top contenders here are mostly going to be around these top spots. You've got Dim is obviously a very strong competitor. You've got Andrew, who's won it 3 times, and you've got Michael, who is the current world champion, and you've got a load of very strong contenders in this kind of whole range here as well.
I'd like to call out Kobe and Jeremy because they're relatively new, and they've really come. I mean, maybe that's not true. I don't know. Maybe they're just new to being among the more visible. But I'm super impressed with both of those guys of how they've progressed quickly. So given another year, if they keep progressing and improving, they both seem really dedicated to getting better. So.
I'd agree with that. I'd add Hayden as well. He's also quite new and is putting a lot of effort into kind of improving his game.
Yes.
I'm going to throw one that's not even on this page yet. And I'm going to put Jakub in there.
Oh yeah, Jakub is great.
I feel like Jakub, it's his year to kind of surprise us and knock the top 3 off there. of their game. I'm not sure if he competed in this one, to be fair.
Yeah, he's probably a bit lower in score for this battle. Also tagged as United States, so I texted him to ask, where are you? I think we should make a distinction whether we are predicting the number 1 seed for the season or the winner of the MEWC tournament, because it could be a totally different story. I think in the tournament everything can happen. As a number 1 seed, probably I have a couple of names in mind as number 1, but again, no names from my side.
I like Liana's prediction that the winner will be a Harry or a Ben.
I don't know about that. She is hedging her bets quite a lot, though. There's many different ways that could be accomplished.
There's a lot of Nicks too.
Yeah, I was about to say I'm going to go for a Nick or a Adam. Maybe, I don't know. Was there another Adam in there?
Yeah.
Okay, so Liana says Harry or Ben. Copy says Jakub. Gabriel says Dim, and Xerobot fan says Andrew, the Annihilator.
Yeah.
I think I would definitely say Dim for number 1 seed. I think he's kind of very hungry for this win as the financial modeling world champion, and I think I'm right in saying that this particular kind of championship is one that he's not come out on top of before. So I think he's going to be kind of very consistently working quite hard to get those points in.
I would agree with you 100% on Dim being the number 1 seed. He's going to be consistently competing and fighting for as high a slot as he can get in each battle. It's the knockout rounds that kill him.
And is nobody worried that Lawrence Lau isn't like living in a cabin in the woods somewhere and just practicing like 24/7, and he's going to emerge in Las Vegas for the last chance, and then like
Lawrence is a very bold man. I don't think if he was planning such a thing at the moment that he would be hiding it.
This is probably fair.
Yeah.
That's not to say he won't just show up for the last chance qualifier and wipe everybody out.
I think he would just love to just like not be visible the entire year and just show up at the very end and win everything. I can just see that as being like I just decided that I'd just give it a try, and meanwhile he's been holed up in some cabin somewhere like doing
I reckon one of these might be Lawrence Lau, and he's just lulling us into a false sense of security. But in the 5 final
you don't have to submit.
In the 5 final battles, he's going to get number 1 rank every single time.
Wait, those are all masters that you're pointing at.
Oh, maybe he's moved to the UK and just hasn't told anybody. But as for the winner, well, Michael Jarman was my line manager for some time, so I feel like I should stick with Michael. He's particularly good at the kind of cases that go through in the finals. He's a very good financial model. He's very good under pressure, and I think now that he has this victory, he's not gonna let it slip this year. So not a very hot take, but I'm gonna go for Michael Jarman to win again. Although I would love to knock him out.
Yeah, I think for this season, I'm with you and Dim. I'm going to back Jakub. He's my he is such a great personality, and it would just be amazing to actually see him win. And is always right up there. Him and Peter, I think, tend to just nip at the heels of the trio of Dim, Andrew, and Jarman. So it would be good to see that.
I think also Willem might be a real threat. I think he said at some point he was going to return this year with boosting motivation. So he's a very solid competitor. I like him a lot. I think under pressure performs really, really good. So interesting to see how this will evolve.
I've personally been knocked out twice by Willem. I got one revenge, but I think quite consistently he's the one who knocks me out. So I'm a bit terrified of him, to be honest.
Good. I'm looking forward to meeting him. He's going to be in London next week.
Oh, is he? That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in a panel with me last year. Well, year before, in Vegas. But he only kind of like popped in and popped out, and wasn't there for the whole of the active cell. So.
Lorenzo, if you maybe write the person you're thinking of on a piece of paper, and then you could reveal it when you win at the end of 2025, and let us know. That
I will do that. I will do that.
Grant, what was your prediction?
Oh, Chris Clark.
I don't think I gave a specific name out there, but I think, it'll be somebody we haven't seen before. I know we've seen Willem there, so I think I spoke to him a little bit, and he seemed like a really strong competitor. So, he's definitely someone to keep an eye out for.
Yeah. For sure.
Toby in the chat mentioned Chris Clark came in second.
Yep. I wonder if Chris Clark competed.
Did you guys hear the story about? Did you guys hear the story about the Michael Jarman?
No.
So
apart from the fact that we've been calling him that in the WhatsApps.
Yeah, I'm the one that started that.
Yeah.
So we were in Vegas. When we were in Vegas, after right before the finals, the night before the finals, I was standing talking to Michael Jarman in front of a craps table or whatever, and these two guys walk up from behind him, and he's wearing his jacket with the Microsoft Excel World Championship on it, and these two guys are like pointing at his jacket from behind, and so they walk by and they're kind of like looking at us. I'm like. And I pointed at Michael and I said, "Do you know who this is?" And they're like, "No, what is this?" I'm like, "This is the Michael Jarman," and they're like, "Oh wow, like, do you want a picture taken with him?" They're like, "Oh no, we're here for Chris Clark," and it's like, "Oh well, Chris Clark doesn't have a chance because like this is the guy right here. This is the Michael Jarman, like, and these guys are like, no, Chris says he's like the best. He's like, he's gonna really do well or whatever. And I was like, no, this is the Michael Jarman. So I got these two guys to take a picture with I took their phones. I took pictures of them with the Michael Jarman to take back to Chris Clark to encourage him. So it was really funny that in the end, the Michael Jarman not only ended up winning, but Chris Clark, the guy that those two guys were rooting for, came in second. So that's how that started.
This is a whole new level of psychological preparation before the battles. Is this kind of thing going to become the default strategy? I know that we mentioned Lawrence Lau probably would have liked it if this kind of thing became quite common.
Yeah.
We are coming up on 2 hours, and I know we have to be conscious of YouTube's recommendation system.
We probably broke all the limits.
At a time.
I'll make sure to replay this when it's posted so the algorithm picks it up.
The algorithm understands, so this is the kind of length we enjoy. Guys, any closing comments or things you want to share and everything?
I hope everybody likes the case, and I hope we see some really creative cases in 2025 with some new ideas. That's my hope.
We have Aiden, who joined like 2 minutes ago. So sorry, Aiden, but we're close to 2 hours of live streaming. So hope you will enjoy the recording.
Yeah, you've got 2 hours to look forward to. See you at 1:50 in the morning.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Lorenzo.
Yes, thank you, Lorenzo.
Thanks to you guys.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure as always. So
and Harry, I hope you stay on to give us some tips for speedrunning against him.
Guys,
Great.
It was a pleasure. Hope to see you again in the lounge soon. We'll for sure have it in the next battle, but probably also before that. So good night to everyone, at least here in Italy, and good day if you are in the US. Bye.
Bye.